Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says that his government will increase funding for defense technology development in Poland. During a visit at the Air Force Institute of Technology in Warsaw, one of Poland's leading defense engineering institutions, Tusk said that an army that wants to effectively defend its territory and the safety of its citizens must be technologically ahead of its opponents.
We will not just keep buying arms and defense systems from abroad. We need to redirect these funds to fuel both Polish companies and Polish brainpower. What we call dual-use technologies, so technologies with both civilian and military applications, are no longer just a slogan. We want world-class engineers and researchers working in places like this one and others like it across our country. We want their brilliance, their sacrifice and their passion, because they're not just here purely for money. We want their talents to produce effects also in the civilian world, in the Polish economy and in Polish academia. And that's what we want to use these funds for.
Hungarian opposition leader Péter Magyar vows to prioritize a close alliance with Poland if his party wins next year's parliamentary election. Recent independent polls show Magyar's Tisza party ahead of Viktor Orbán's ruling Fidesz.
Viktor Orbán has managed to bring Polish-Hungarian relations to a low point. Where we are now is an example of Orbán's incompetence, arrogance and irresponsibility.
Az arrogancia és a felelőtlenség mintapéldája. És igen.
And that is why the first trip of the Prime Minister of the Tisza government will not be to Moscow or Beijing, but to Warsaw.
Hanem Varsóba vezetni.
The British Royal Air Force team stationed at Poland's Malbork Air Base has completed its 4-month tour of duty. The unit was part of a NATO mission tasked with protecting the alliance's eastern flank. The British aircrews who were flying Eurofighter jets worked alongside Polish and Swedish airmen. They were part of NATO's enhanced air policing and Baltic air policing missions. The aim was to support the defense of the airspace around the alliance's eastern border, the Baltic Sea, and those Baltic states that do not have their own fighter aircraft. The RAF reported that British fighter jets were scrambled 20 times during the 4-month tour. In all cases, the NATO response was triggered by the presence of Russian reconnaissance aircraft. Reuters is reporting that Germany has begun work on a series of multi-billion euro military procurement orders to boost the country's defenses.
Sources told the news agency that Berlin is looking to buy 20 Eurofighter jets and as many as 3,500 Patriot infantry fighting vehicles. Also in the pipeline is the purchase of up to 3,000 Boxer armored vehicles. The procurement orders are part of Chancellor Friedrich Merz's push to build Europe's most powerful conventional army. He is aiming to reduce reliance on the United States, which is seen as an unpredictable ally, and take greater responsibility for European security.
U.S. President Donald Trump said that Russia has 10 days to cease military operations in Ukraine or face new sanctions. Trump made the remark aboard Air Force One as he returned to the United States from his visit to Scotland.
10 days from today.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it.
Good. We have a scoop. And then, we're going to put on tariffs and stuff, and I don't know if it's going to affect Russia, because he wants to obviously probably keep the war going. But we're going to put on tariffs and the various things that you put on. It may or may not affect them, but it could.
Speaking during his nightly address, Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia is ignoring calls to end the war and that more international pressure is needed to push Moscow toward the negotiating table. At the same time, the Ukrainian president thanked his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump for continued backing of Ukraine's army.
Just yesterday, there was a very necessary statement from the President of the United States, Donald Trump. A lot of support from the world, but still, the shelling and even demonstrative killings of our people by the Russians continue. Every such Russian strike and Russian insolence in response to the world's demands to end the war, all of this confirms that pressure is needed. More sanctions are needed against Russia, stable support for Ukraine and our defence of life, and coordinated diplomacy for peace.
Russia reportedly used jet-powered drones in last night's strikes on Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force says almost 80 UAVs were used in the attack, and 8 of them had jet engines. Ukraine's air defense forces managed to down or disable 51 drones. The jet-powered UAVs are a new addition to the Russian arsenal. Experts say they are much harder to intercept as they travel much faster than regular drones pictured here. Over the last 24 hours, Russia killed 7 civilians and wounded 21 more when strike UAVs fell on 7 locations across the country, including in the Kharkiv, Donetsk, Kherson, Sumy, and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Representatives of Ukraine and Poland have met in Kiev to discuss the next stages of World War II victim exhumation efforts.
The Ukrainian Ministry of Culture announced that the representatives, including Alexander Alfarov of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance, took part in the talks regarding recent exhumations in Puzhniki, Ukraine, where the remains of at least 42 individuals were recovered. Both sides expressed support for continuing the search there and near the Polish town of Zbojska. Ukraine is also awaiting final approval from Poland to begin the exhumation of Ukrainian victims in Yurechkova.
A tsunami warning has been issued for the North Pacific Ocean region following an 8.8 magnitude earthquake off Russia's eastern Kamchatka Peninsula. The tsunami waves have already reached Russia, with reports coming in of some reaching 5 meters. French Polynesia has also reported that waves as high as 4 meters have reached its shores.
The quake struck around 130 kilometers east of the coast. Tsunami warnings were issued for Russia, Japan, the US, Canada, Taiwan, Peru, Mexico, the Philippines, and more. US President Donald Trump took to his social media platform to share the advisory.
Due to a massive earthquake that occurred in the Pacific Ocean, a tsunami warning is in effect for those living in Hawaii. A tsunami watch is in effect for Alaska and the Pacific coast of the United States. Japan is also in the way. Please visit tsunami.gov for the latest information. Stay strong and safe.
The tsunami has already hit the Russian northern Kuril Islands, where authorities have now declared an emergency following flooding that damaged local housing. No injuries have been reported so far. Japanese authorities have issued a red level warning for the whole of the country's east coast and a yellow tsunami alert for its west coast. The east is projected to expect waves up to 3 meters tall. So far, 50-centimeter high waves have been reported on the coast. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was evacuated. The U.S. Coast Guard ordered all commercial vessels to evacuate harbors in Hawaii, and local residents are reportedly moving to higher ground in preparation for the impact. Those in coastal areas where the tsunami warnings have been issued were advised to seek safety and avoid beach areas and taking photos of the incoming waves.
The Russian Federation wants to control the Republic of Moldova from autumn onwards, said Moldovan President Maia Sandu at a press briefing in Chisinau. She accused Russia of preparing an unprecedented interference campaign ahead of the country's parliamentary elections in September.
President Sandu warned that electoral corruption and illegal external financing from Russia were the biggest threats to the upcoming election. Moscow already controls a part of Moldova, the breakaway region of Transnistria, which borders Ukraine from the west. And similarly to Ukraine, since Moldova decided on a pro-European path, launching the process of negotiations in preparation for EU accession, Moscow has been attempting to undermine its democratic institutions, likely with the end goal of installing a pro-Kremlin government in Chisinau.
Early free elections are the final demand of the protesters in Serbia, said Besford Ratzai, international relations professor at the University of Pristina, speaking to TVP World about the protests in Serbia. On Monday, protesters and police clashed in the city of Novi Pazar in southwest Serbia after masked men tried to break up a protest taking place in a university building.
The ultimate demand for the protesters is to have an early elections because of high level of corruptions that have been going on in Serbia, a backslide in democratic development, economic stagnations, and everything related to that. So I think, and the collapse of the the incident in Novi Sad that happened in train stations is just a tip of the iceberg of what's going on in Serbia and throughout Serbia because of an autocratic regime.
According to Romanian emergency services, the death toll from floods in the country rose to at least 3 by Tuesday night. Since Sunday, the Suceava and Neamț regions experienced heavy downpours, which resulted in at least 2,500 people receiving injuries or losing their homes. The Romanian Civil Service announced that on Tuesday evening, officers recovered the remains of a 66-year-old male from a river. The 2 other victims of the natural disaster are women aged 85 and 89. Overall, the floods in Romania prompted the country's authorities to evacuate over 1,000 people since Monday morning. In response to the scale of the disaster, local authorities in Neamț have appealed to Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan to support the recovery efforts. According to weather forecasts, by noon Wednesday, the rain should stop in the central and eastern parts of the country. The dubbing industry is currently nervous as top Hollywood A-listers like Brad Pitt or Meryl Streep might soon be speaking languages other than English without an accent thanks to AI. Will this make human dubbing unnecessary? Artists in Germany are calling for stricter regulations in the dubbing industry.
Watching your favorite movie in your native tongue might soon be at risk, as AI is being leveraged to cut costs in production. This development has prompted 12 well-known dubbing actors in Germany to call for regulations on using AI in filmmaking, TV, and other audiovisual media. The TikTok video went viral, garnering 8.8 million views since it was published in March and prompting nearly 74,000 signatures on a petition by the VDS Voice Actors Association.
Du kennst diese Gesichter mit diesen Stimmen, aber du kennst nicht die Gesichter hinter den Stimmen.
Ich bin SpongeBob mit all seinen Emotionen.
Echten.
Keine künstlichen.
Wir alle sollen bald eine Computerstimme bekommen.
Und dann müsst ihr euch Filme ansehen.
Mit künstlichen Stimmen von Robotern.
Und diese Roboter wurden mit unseren Stimmen trainiert.
Ohne unsere Zustimmung. Auf illegale Weise.
Illegal.
Illegal.
Those in support of using AI to convey original meaning in another language in movies point to numbers as the decisive factor.
We can of course produce more cheaply, because one of the decisive cost factors in something like this is ultimately people. And if we no longer have to bring 40 people into the studio, but perhaps just 2, this naturally reduces the production costs.
Experts, however, point out that AI, with all its advantages, still lacks a very human component.
I can say the same sentence in a completely different way. I communicate exactly the same content, but I can easily evoke completely different emotions with nuances, with emphasis, with variations in volume. And sound is something that works on an absolutely emotional level. That's why I really don't think AI is suitable for this at the moment.
The dubbing sector has experienced substantial growth, powered by the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix. Market research firms estimate the global dubbing market will grow to $4.3 billion this year. And professionals in the field argue that AI technology compromises quality despite its cost and speed advantages.
And I would say to politicians, think about what it does to a society and an economy if intellectual property is no longer protected. Because then nobody will produce intellectual property anymore, because they'll think it will be stolen tomorrow anyway, and it won't be profitable.
For now, various German artists are calling for protection of their craft and for captivating films with voices of real people with real feelings.
Schützen wir dieses außergewöhnliche Handwerk.
Schützen wir die künstlerische und nicht die künstliche Intelligenz.
Lasst euch nicht nehmen, was ihr liebt. Fesselnde Filme mit Stimmen von echten Menschen, mit echten Gefühlen.
And this concludes Midday Report. Thank you so much for being with us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.